From the Microsoft Technology Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, this is Tech Connection Live. Brought to you by Widgmo from Component One. Download your free trial at widgmo.com. Up next, Intro to Juice UI by Andrew Powell, Senior Developer at appendTo LLC.
So this is Juice UI. This is me. So I'm the project and development lead for this project. Like I was told, Senior Developer at appendTo. I'm also very much a beer snob. And if you try and argue Detroit sports with me, it will be a long conversation. So, Juice UI. It is not a drink. We actually get a lot of confusion about this from overseas, believe it or not. It's nothing to do with beverages. We had a really fancy acronym worked up for it, but in the end, it was too confusing, and we just decided to keep the name. So, very simply put, it's a component library. It's a lot of controls built into this. There's a lot of back-end code that nobody ever needs to see. Everything exposed through IntelliSense is basically for the end user and developer. It is completely free. We will never be charging for this, and it is open source. Anybody can contribute. We very much welcome contributions. And the community is, I don't know, it's fledgling. We have a lot of discussion on Stack Overflow. There's a lot of discussion on Twitter. We'll cover some of that, some of the community support options a little bit later. But if you find this interesting and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or through any of the through communities that we go through. So this is important. I want everybody to know and remember, and if you talk to anybody else about it, make sure you mention it's free and open. It's a very important part. It is built on jQuery UI. So jQuery UI, if you don't know about it, it's basically a UI JavaScript library. It enables lots of fun, pretty things to pop up on the screen. You need to do very minimal amount of work to get this to happen. If you've worked with jQuery in the past, it feels pretty native. It's very much built in the same patterns as jQuery, and it's very, very easy to use if you're used to those patterns. So breaking into that tends to be a little bit difficult for people if they've never seen a lot of JavaScript. It's definitely something that you don't want to just go from no JavaScript right to jQuery UI. So in that same vein, it's part of the reason we built this. A lot of WebForms developers don't necessarily know a whole lot about JavaScript. This is where this comes into play. So jQuery UI is not pure magic, though. This is the URL for it if you're interested in checking it out. We'll actually be popping it up to take a look at some of the controls so you can see the parallels between jQuery UI and what Juice provides. So a lot of people ask us why we created this thing. As a company and our supporters in the project, we really see this as the model for developing new controls, new widgets for the UI on websites and enabling them to be accessed through the server. So if I was just talking to a guy out in the hall, if you've ever had a date picker or I don't know, even a progress bar, and you want to set the value on it so it looks really nice, the user gets a good experience, and then you need to access the control on the back end. There's typically a series of tasks you need to go through to accomplish that. With this, there's one line of code, plot the control on the page, you can access it like you would a regular text box, button, whatever, and you're good to go. There was no previous model for this. There's a couple other packages like the Ajax Control Toolkit that's out there. There's really no model. Each individual control is built differently. Each individual control has different script behind it. The code's different for each. There's no standard. There's no set way to do this. So if you have your own jQuery UI widget, let's say you get into it, you like it, you build your own widget based on their framework and their model, and then you want to create a server-side control. Well, you pretty much got to start from scratch. You got to figure out all the problems, diagnose it all, debug all the different issues across different postbacks and browsers and all that stuff on your own. So this is where this comes into play. This is really, really painless. We put together a model where you can take a jQuery UI widget, create a server-side control using Juice UI as a base library, and within 10 minutes you got something you can access on the server. So it's pretty slick. Brings up the question, really, who should be using this? If you're not using jQuery UI, or you're not using jQuery already, you really have to consider the cost benefit of implementing something like this. If you don't have a lot of resources, that's something to consider. If you're already using jQuery or jQuery UI, then it's a no-brainer. This makes server-side development for WebForms way easier if you're already using jQuery UI, to the point where I'd say you can strip out a considerable amount of your front-end code and replace it with this. If anybody's not using a front-end library already, if you're doing all your controls manually, if you're developing all your own JavaScript ad hoc or in-house, custom library, that kind of thing, this is a really good way to go. If you're on a team that you need a really easy way to update your control, your user experience visually, say you want to roll out a brand new look, there's a theming system built into this to where you update one CSS file, a couple core CSS classes, and it will update the entire user experience. And then clearly, if you want a really beautiful UI, there's just no question. This is, for me, this is on the top of the gambit. jQuery UI has outstanding visuals. They're big on accessibility. They really pay attention to everybody in the marketplace in terms of what people want to see, how people use things. And then going one further, the Widgmo guys have really gone on that and taken that step in a great direction. They have, their themes, in my opinion, are better than the default ones that come with jQuery UI. With Juice, we'll touch on it in a bit. With Juice UI, we ship 2 of our own themes. One of them is on our website. The other one's just for demoing. But we really encourage people to use the CSS framework and make it match their own site. It is relatively painless. So on with the show. Widgets. Juice UI has widgets. This is kind of a foreign term to WinForms and WebForms developers. We're all used to controls. Widgets are what is in the JavaScript. They define widgets as, you know, any little component you may need to put together. So there's a little ambiguous, but there's 3 categories. And you'll see this on jQuery UI's website. You got widgets, you got interactions, and then you got utilities. Differences between the 3, widgets are like the date picker. You know, it's a set widget, it's there, it does one thing, and that's what it does. You got interactions, that's like dragging something and dropping it somewhere else, rearranging some items in a sortable list. And then you've got utilities. Right now there's only one utility, and it's a position one. I'll show you how that works in a little bit. But for everything that jQuery UI provides, we have a control wrapper for. So everything that's in that library, even if they update and add a new control, will have something for that. So if in 30 days they release jQuery UI 1.9, they got 3 new widgets in that. Within 2 days, we're going to have that released. So we'll have that available for everyone. So you're not going to be losing out. You're not going to be waiting 3 months for, you know, the server-side guys to put their stuff together and match the front-end guys. These are the widgets that are available. This is pretty standard. Most of the UI libraries out there have this kind of thing. So if you've done any work on the front end or with the front end, these are probably components that you've seen before. Again, these are the different interactions, dragging things, dropping things, rearranging them. If you've ever used a WYSIWYG editor on a site and had to rearrange it, or excuse me, resize it, that's something that this can do for you. And then there's the position utility. 1.9, jQuery 1.9 is coming out, and there will be a few more utilities, and we will support them. So the individual widgets. This is what it looks like when you're using it. This is my favorite widget because whenever I'm developing a new one, I always use this as a template. The code is by far the simplest for it, so it's really easy to strip out. If you're interested in making widgets for jQuery UI, it's a good one to start with. It's really easy to reverse engineer and see how everything works internally. But skipping past jQuery UI, this is how you would put this on your page. One line, one server tag, and you're done. And it will generate results. There you go. This is a live running thing. This is demo code that we inserted, and it's already rendered the page. So top one is standard progress bar. Bottom one is your animation. And you can see from the code how simple it is to change the two. I mean, all we did was change the height, and we gave it a new background image, and it does something brand new. So if you've ever used a shopping cart or something like that, You've seen a little animated bar to indicate progress. It's really easy to use. The button. ASP.NET comes with a button. And I'm sorry that got cut off there. There's quite a bit of code. ASP.NET button is fine, I guess. You can see here what's going on is it's actually being extended. There's two different kinds of Juice UI controls. There's a standalone, and then there's the extenders. The extenders are what you're seeing here. We've got a regular server control, button, input, a link, and then the extender actually just targets that and does its thing on it. So that will produce a pretty slick result. It's way easier than trying to mess around with the default buttons, and you get a really uniform look. So what you're seeing here on the top is the buttons that were extended, the different kinds of buttons, your link button, regular old button, and then on the bottom, I'm going to go back to that, is a series of radio buttons. So if you don't like the look of the radio button and you'd rather have something that works the same way and looks a lot prettier, that's a good way to go. That's called a button set. So you can see the button set tag. It's the same exact practice. So we really, when we were writing this, the main goal here was to make this as painless as possible. Like I had mentioned, there's other frameworks out there that do a similar thing, but working with them is not quite so nice. That's about as political as I can put it. Slider is another popular one. This is another default widget that comes with jQuery UI, and there's also one in widgets as well. You can see the result there. Range slider just picks values within a specific range. You can set it up so it'll snap. There's a bunch more options. I'll be bringing up the Juice website in a second, which if you're interested in this, I encourage you to check it out because you will see all the different options and the way you can modify these. And the nice thing about this is if you ever get confused, you can always go back to jQuery UI's website. If you're ever like, well, how does a particular property work? You can always go back to jQuery UI's website and look at the original source. They do have all the similar demos up there. So the most popular control on the planet is the day picker. Everybody's got their own implementation. Everybody on the planet. And some of them are horrible and some of them are beautiful. So jQuery UI standardizes on one look, one functionality. You can do a lot with this. I've taken this and made a full blown out Outlook clone. It's really, really extendable. And it works just like you'd expect. Pick a date, pops in there. So this is another extender. We're extending a text box to contain that value. You can use a hidden input. You can use a text area. Whatever you want to target, it will insert the chosen value into that. So you're not bound to a text box. Tabs. I hope everybody enjoys bacon ipsum. Tabs is another popular one. Everybody uses them for some reason. Not a huge fan when it comes to UX, but they do have their purpose. This is pretty straightforward. You got a couple tab pages, insert your content, assign a title, and it automatically generates it. And again, all this is doing is it's using jQuery UI behind the scenes. It's hooking up all the events, it's hooking up everything you need. Most of these controls do have postback events. On the slider, if you do postback, it will send the value back to you. So on a postback, you can access the value of it. It's not something you can do very easily if you're using jQuery UI straight up, or if you're using another JavaScript component straight up. There's absolutely no work involved with getting that value back. So here are the controls that I couldn't get working in the demo environment. The accordion. And this is, again, this is the Juice UI site. I'll have links up to this at the very end. The accordion is, if you've ever used one, as you expect. Works very well. And you can see it's a very similar setup to the tab control. Set of tab pages, you have accordion panels. Set up the content, a couple properties, and you're good to go. So the position utility. This is a really neat one. There's a similar control for the Ajax Control Toolkit. It doesn't have so many options, and the setup on this is really logical. There is way more that you can do with this than what I have demoed on this page. We're planning on expanding the documentation a little bit, but this is one where I'd say you definitely benefit from going back to jQuery UI's website. They have 20 some odd examples of how to use this. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a positioning utility. So you want something to float on the right of something at all times, this is what you use. You need something to stick at the left, on the top, whatever. You can set offsets, you can set conditionals based on where it is on the page. And again, this is a utility for somebody that's not necessarily adept with a lot of the front-end development. If you don't know all the various browser rules to positioning an element around the page, within CSS, then this is a great one to use. It's a no-brainer. Droppable is one of the other popular ones. If you've Microsoft had a thing they released a while back. It basically allowed you to move an object around the page, and then it would post back automatically, and you could save its position where it was. And it was kind of like, Facebook was doing something a while back. This is several years ago, but you can do pretty much the same thing with this. This will post back as soon as, if you set it up to, as soon as an item is dropped, give you details on the item. It'll even give you position. So if you deal with rearranging anything in a page, in any kind of an app, that's really, really handy. And then sortable is another popular one. Pretty straightforward. Move an item around, rearrange them in order. If you've used any music sites that allow you to build a playlist, that's the kind of thing you'd see on there. Here we go. We're into the look and feel now. So they do a bunch of fun stuff, but that theme is probably not going to work for everybody. Neither of those themes. Neither of those are intended to be dropped into your website. You wouldn't take the juiceui.com theme and drop it into your shopping cart. You just wouldn't do that. It's pretty bold and it's out there, and it doesn't really work well anywhere else. So it's meant to be an example. It's meant to be an example of how you can change things. Theme roller. Theme roller is really slick. It is the utility by which you can create themes for all of jQuery UI. I was saying earlier that you can change one base CSS class and it'll affect all the widgets. That's how you do that. I'm going to pop this open so you can check it out. There is a gallery of predefined themes. You can download those, set that up with Juice, and it'll automatically work. You don't need to worry about doing anything custom for Juice UI. We built it so you can just use any jQuery UI theme, or excuse me, any theme roller theme that you find. So this is what it looks like. And I wanted to show this because it's really important. People don't understand that typically when they see Juice UI right off the bat, they don't understand they have these kind of options. This is the builder right here. It's using jQuery UI right there. You can go property by property and set all these things to customize your view, and you don't need to know CSS. You just don't. If you need to implement a couple controls on a page and you need to match your site, and you don't know CSS, you can jump on here, generate a theme, plop it into your directory, and you're good to go. And these were the galleries that I was talking about. Like I said, there's 20 some odd here that you can choose from. They tried to create ones that would match most color schemes on the web. Not all of them are pretty, if you ask me, but they'll get the job done. And again, you can use that tool or you can go right into the raw CSS. jQuery UI on top, in addition to theme roller, has its own base CSS framework. And again, because Juice UI uses jQuery UI on the back end, it's synonymous. It's one and the same. You affect jQuery UI, you affect Juice UI. Theme roller can be a bit much for people, or it cannot be enough control. If you want granular control, you need to get into the CSS. So that is fully documented. Again, we're back at the jQuery UI website. It is a good reference, even though you're using server controls. I want to emphasize that. It basically explains what each one of the core framework CSS classes do, what they affect. So if you're curious and you're not getting what you need from looking at the source CSS, you can come here and get a better explanation. Sometimes they are a little ambiguous and they are hard to follow, and getting a handle on which elements, one CSS class effects can be a bit much. There are a couple, like UI widget affects all of them. So if you modify that, you're modifying everything right off the bat. Some of them affect only specific widgets. So again, this is a good reference to keep in mind. Okay, this is an excerpt. I wanted to pull this out because this is actually from the freshly squeezed theme that we put together for Juice UI. This affects the button. I can go back if you need a reference. But this affects the display of the button, the width. If you're unfamiliar with CSS, this might read like Greek. But you get into it, it'll get more and more familiar. There's a couple fixes for cross-browser stuff in there, but this is straight out of the source. And this is a good example of how you can affect only one widget. Each widget is going to have its own CSS classes and also the core ones. So if you want to affect all of them, you go for the core classes. If you want to affect a couple of them, you go for the specific widget classes. In addition to using Juice, in addition to developing with Juice, you can develop for Juice. I mentioned that earlier, where you can take any jQuery UI widget and in a matter of minutes turn it into a server-side control. There's this guy, and then there's those people in Pittsburgh who sponsored this little get-together. Widgmo open for Juice UI is a great product. I recommend everybody check it out. We partnered with Component One when we were putting this together and helped them in the process. It not only solidified our model and how we wanted to put these controls together, having a third party use it at the same time we were developing it, but we were also able to fix a slew of bugs right off the bat. Component One found a lot of problems with this right before we were released, and it's really, they were partly responsible for how solid it is right now. So I can't emphasize enough how easy it is. I'm going to be down the road working on an extension library. There are some gaps in jQuery UI that aren't filled and need to be fulfilled. And I'm going to be writing a couple jQuery UI widgets that are separate from the core project, and then I'm going to be using Juice to hook them up. And I'm going to be releasing an extension library that just references Juice UI. So if you need these particular controls, you download Juice UI through NuGet or through another method. You can get the extension library on top of that, and you use it just like you would Juice UI. How do you hook up a widget, jQuery UI widget, to Juice UI? We're going to be writing a series of tutorials on exactly that. We're going to step everybody through it. It's not the most straightforward process, so we're going to explain how properties hook up to options in jQuery UI. We're going to explain how to set up the events. The source for these controls are actually really, really simple, but knowing specific properties that are required to set each one of these up properly can be tricky. So this is the GitHub page for Juice UI. I wanted to bring this up just to show you the source for the progress bar. That's it. It's all that's required to hook this up through the server. So you got one property there, and that's the value property. That comes back through postback. You can access that as much as you'd like. This does not have any events. Progress bar doesn't come with any events, so you're not going to see that in there. By contrast, here is the options for the progress bar on the jQuery UI website. Now these are mirrored on the Juice UI website as well, and they're a little bit different. They're tailored towards the server-side crowd, but again, this is a good reference to go back to. If you're ever curious, if the description's just throwing you off on the Juice UI website and you want a better description or an example, you can go back and check out the JavaScript that's associated with it. Now, I was going to bring up the source for the progress bar JavaScript, but skip over that. It's very, very simple, and the way that we have it set up is it's mapped. So I was saying earlier that properties map to options, events are mapped to events. Everything is done in the back end for you. So if you need support, there are a lot of community options. You can reach out to me directly. I'm here to help anybody out. If you don't think this is cool, but one of your buddies does, let him know that they can reach out to me directly. I'm on Twitter. I actually run the Juice UI Twitter account. So if anybody's replying, that's me. I try as much as I can to reply on Stack Overflow. We don't tend to get too much on GitHub. We've had 2 issues filed on there. People tend to go out to the other communities for some reason. So if you're curious about the source and you want to get your hands dirty with that, check it out. Fork the project. Again, any questions, just let me know. We are on Google Groups. The URL is massive, and it's really convoluted and has a bunch of crazy characters in it. So just search for Juice UI Google Group, and it's the first one. If you need really serious assistance, if you work for a big company and you have a suite of jQuery UI controls you want to set this up with, you can get a hold of us at juiceui.com/support. We have some packages up there that you can choose from. I'm not going to push this too much, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of it. And then I wanted to touch on a lot of the questions we've gotten since we released this thing. Hopefully, I'll cover a couple of them if there's any lingering ones. MVC, that's the new hotness. Everybody loves it. WebForms is old and busted. And people are starting to develop more with MVC right off the bat rather than WebForms. That's the trend, that's the pattern. So we are very aware of this, and we're working towards bringing this to MVC. So you're going to have a series of helpers that'll do pretty much the same thing. You won't get the postback support. That just doesn't come with MVC. You'll have to do a little bit more work on that side, but that goes with the territory. We got a lot of feedback about .NET 3.5. There's a slew of people on SharePoint still, and SharePoint is just a pain point. I don't know if anybody's worked with it, but it's fun. So unfortunately, because of some of the features in 4.0 and that we wanted to leverage, we did not support 3.5. We started out with 3.5, and then we found out we could do all this cool stuff, and we're like, all right, the heck with this. We've considered trying to backport, but I can't see that happening anytime soon with 4.5 right around the corner. So if anybody was paying attention about a month ago, they talked about the release of 4.5. Microsoft, that is. And then why WebForms? Why not just start with MVC? You can't ignore the crowd that's out there. I talked to Scott Hanselman and Scott Guthrie 2 weeks ago, and they don't have any base statistics that I can really throw out there, but they estimate about 80% of ASP.NET websites are still WebForms. So it is changing, but that's just the fact right now. Is Juice UI bug-free? I am not perfect, so no. We have 6 pending issues right now in GitHub. They're relatively minor ones, but they're still there. We're going to have those cleaned up in about a week, and we'll be releasing another maintenance version, in a week and a half. So the big difference between this project and some of the other ones that are out there is we have a fairly consistent release cycle. If we don't have anything reported, we're going to find new stuff to add to it. And if we can't find new stuff, we're going to be asking everybody to please suggest some stuff. We want to keep this on a fast release cycle, no more than 3 to 4 weeks. The nice thing about it is you won't have any pain upgrading because jQuery UI doesn't change. jQuery UI doesn't change, you don't have any worries about upgrading. You're just going to get fixes and new features. We are going to try and support some other jQuery UI projects in the future, but that's way down the road. There are some fringe projects out there that use it. Don't know if anybody's aware of them, but I just figured I'd mention that. And what about the Ajax Control Toolkit? Has anybody used that at all? Nope? All right, good deal. It'll play nice with Juice. You can use both of them. We think that Juice is the better way to go in terms of a model, not in terms of quality or in terms of the project itself. As a model, we think that Juice UI is the best way. The Ajax Control Toolkit is integrated into a lot of sites. It's been around a long time, so it's not something that we understand. It's not something you can just rip out and replace. It would take a lot of time to do that. So they can play hand in hand. They can run down a field side by side, giggling like school children. They work just fine together, and there's no conflicts that we've been able to find yet. We've done a lot of testing on that. So if you're just curious and you want to implement one control and you're still using ACT, that's cool. You can give that a shot. And then there's the old migration question. I'd love to migrate from library X, but there are gaps in what X has and what JuiceUI provides. That's a big problem, especially if you want to move from one system completely to another. That's where Widgmo comes in. That's part of the reason we partner with them. We put together a big list of what the gaps were in other libraries compared to JuiceUI, and jQuery UI specifically, and Widgmo fills a lot of those. Not all of them yet, but most of them. So if JuiceUI lacks control that you're already using, check out Widgmo. So Widgmo's open that connects to JuiceUI is completely free. And we're done. So I appreciate your pity. Any questions? You guys want to beat me up on any specifics? All right.
I saw it was on that one demo slide you had. It was dual license, MIT GPL.
Yeah, this is straight from the jQuery UI project. It is MIT and GPL. You can choose. The JuiceUI project itself is as well. jQuery is MIT GPL. jQuery UI is MIT GPL, and most of the stuff that we release is as well. It's I don't know. We just like to give people a choice when it comes to that. If you're going to modify and you like to contribute back, that'd be outstanding. We love to see what you're going to do, but you're not entitled, or you're not expected to give back.
Did you use some kind of tool to do this cool demo slide deck?
We did. We have something internal at appendTo. I can't speak a whole lot about it, but I did. It is used on a different platform, and I did port it to ASP.NET for this demo. We are discussing releasing it. So if you're curious, definitely follow me on Twitter or follow appendTo on Twitter. And you'll know right away when we release it because we'll make a big deal about it. And for what it's worth, appendTo does a lot of training, and this is also the same format all their training slides are in.
What is the old school method of taking a jQuery native control and sending it back to an ASP control?
Sure. Typically what you do is the process starts, you're going to build out your website, your base template. You got to download jQuery and jQuery UI independently. Then you got to get your theme set up, get your directory structure set up. Make sure that your master page has all that stuff on there in the right order, in the right spots. You're going to open up, your whatever ASPX file you're working in. Set up your, let's say just for the date picker, for example. You're going to set up your text box, right, as per usual. Then you're going to fire up a new JavaScript file. You're going to write the jQuery code to affect the page when the document's ready. Then you're going to properly ID your text box. Set the client mode to static or whatever you want. Or if it's,
you're talking there, that's an ASP control text box.
Correct. An ASP text box, yeah. So if your client ID mode is the old school, where you got that big long string, you got to identify that. Typically not too difficult to do. But if you don't already know it, you got to use server-side code to spit that out to the page. And then you got to read that through JavaScript, which is a pain. So typically what you do is set the client mode to static. Then you write the initialization code. Actually show you what that looks like for the date picker. So this will go in a separate JavaScript file. And I had no problem showing you this because if you'd rather use jQuery UI, I am all for that. This is a fantastic library. This is the base initialization right here. If you want to get fancy, if you want to throw on some of those options that you saw, which one was it? So you got a few more options you can throw in there. That's what that looks like. So once you do that, then you're reading the post back as per usual from the ASP.NET, when the value changes. So if you post back with a button, if you have an auto post back set up when the value changes, you're reading it as per usual. Now if you take something like a progress bar, I can't think of a situation off the top of my head. You can use something like slider as an example. Slider doesn't affect, it's not an extender, it's a standalone. It doesn't affect an element by default. So if you were going to implement the slider, you'd have to go in here, do the same thing, initialize it. You'd set up maybe a hidden field instead of a text box, right? Set up a hidden field, throw a run it server on it. You go down here and you set it up. Here's your initialization right here. And then you go down here and you'd set it up so it would use an event. You'd want to catch the stop event down here. So you can see the code to set that up. So and that is on mouse up, there's no timer or anything like that. So right here you have to set up the event. So what you have to actually do is within this event you have to then set the value of that hidden field. Now if you're using this through actually I can show you. Let me bring up GitHub real quick.
So really, it's not a lot of extra work to go right from your.
It's a matter of 10 minutes versus 1 minute. So over time, this will save you work.
You're saying versus using the new juice controls that are already tied to them.
Juice to put a slider on a page, one server tag. Versus what we're going through right now. I'm going to bring up the slider demo. It's a bit of a mess. This is kind of our test site. You can see right here, that's how you access the value through Juice UI. So it's just a property, like on any other server control. So you can see we got a change event set up for that. Just binding to that, I can go back and show you the page associated with it. Oh, that's sortable, my bad. So we've got a bunch of them on here, but literally it is one tag. That's the one with the event. You don't even need to bind it in code. You can do it right there on the tag. So yeah, that's the main differences between the two. It's really one line versus a setup. Sure.
So my understanding is this juice is the main advantage is the binding of the data. Is that what's the main gain I got?
The main advantage to this is that it's easy to put on a page. There's no additional work other than a server tag. So you're going to save time there. You can set up events on the server side with these controls. You can't do that. If you're going to implement jQuery UI through JavaScript, you have to go through a whole bunch of work. And I encourage you to take a look at the source of Juice to see what that work looks like. But you can't get an event on the server on a postback from a jQuery UI control. You can with the Juice UI wrapper. So the Juice UI server control has server-side events. jQuery UI does not.
Next question is, for some of the jQuery UI I already use, I have extended the UI component. For example, autocomplete.
Sure.
I have a maximum of 100 items I can display. Okay. So how this Juice UI work with the customized extensions?
I could show you if I was able to see your code. Actually, if you'd like, after this weekend, like next week, if we converse via email, I'd love to see your code and I can show you how to do that. We actually have several extensions built in to the main Juice JavaScript file, and we do that because there are some things that are lacking when it comes to hooking this up on the server. Let me show you UI tabs. So there's a problem with the jQuery UI component for tabs that it triggers one of the events too soon. And if you have Juice UI tabs set up to auto postback when a tab changes, it'll loop. And you'll never be able to get the page to stop looping. So we wrote an extension, and that's what you're seeing here on line 165. We wrote an extension to tabs that redefines the event so we can use it properly on the server. Now, this is just an example of an extension. So if you have customized widgets, like you've taken autocomplete, like you said, and you've customized it internally, I can show you how to take that custom code, break that out, make an extension out of it, and still be able to use autocomplete through Juice UI. And it'll also be a good model moving ahead if you need to change the behavior of any other jQuery UI widget. You'll be able to use that same pattern to do that without having to affect the core component.
So in a model where I want the client to be doing all the work on Good example, I'm working on a thing right now where I want the client to add rows of, they're making a quantity, number of points, what are the values for points, and then there's an extended comment that can tell you. They can add as many of those rows as they need, validate them, save that, and I need that array for later. I want all of that to happen on the client side, so the server doesn't do anything. But I do, when all those values come back, then I want to validate them on the server. In that instance, where I don't want postbacks to be happening,
Right.
Would I even bother to send them server controls there, or would I just simply validate them as an array? Probably be the case.
If you're in a mixed environment where you're using server controls in MVC, go ahead. It's not going to hurt you. You're not going to be able to use the postback features at all. I mean, that's a given, but it's not going to hurt you. What we want to do is we want to make it more native. We want to use it like traditional helpers. And then we're really putting a plan together right now. There's a branch on the project on GitHub for MVC, so you can follow the progress if you'd like. We're very welcome to input from the community on this because we're just starting to build this out. But we really want to make it native so it's like a helper, and then we want to provide a little bit of extra functionality so it makes things a little bit more painless. Like I was saying, where you might have to create a separate hidden input and then wire that all up through JavaScript. We'd really like to eliminate that for people, and that would make your job reading that data back a lot easier. So that's definitely something we're keeping in mind. There's going to be value add there. We're not just going to be like, yeah, here you can use this. It's really no different than using jQuery UI. No, we're going to make sure it's solid.
So can you have those controls post back, well, like in the example I just gave, allow the user to add rows, do that at the jQuery side, and then that control has a submit, but that's the only post back you have. Is there a granularity there, or are they?
I think we could wire something up for that.
On any change, are you doing the post back?
Yeah, I mean, that'd definitely be an option.
Tech Connection Live. Brought to you by Widgmo from Component One. Download your free trial at widgmo.com.
Take your HTML5 applications to the next level with Widgmo. Widgmo is a complete kit of over 40 UI widgets. Enjoy rich, interactive charts, data grids, menus, and more. With Widgmo, your web applications will perform faster, run smoother, and be more engaging than ever before. Built with HTML5, jQuery, CSS3, and SVG, Widgmo widgets make your applications ready for today's web. Easily develop a consistent look and feel across your entire application with one of our professionally designed themes, or put together your own with Theme Roller. Widgmo, it's everything you need to build a better web. Go to widgmo.com and download your free trial of Widgmo.